Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we're looking at a situation that, well, it just seems to defy logic. I want you to imagine something. Let's say you're wanted by the U.S. Justice Department.
And not for something small. We're talking serious charges, fraud, organized crime, that kind of thing.
Exactly. So where do you go to be safe? It sounds like fiction, but one of the safest places for you to be right now is Venezuela.
It's a diplomatic safe haven, you could say, but not because of some secret deal. It exists because of a quiet, almost bureaucratic failure of the legal system.
Right.
This isn't a spy movie. There are no dramatic extractions. This whole thing is about the slow, grinding halt of the rule of law when two countries just stop talking to each other.
So our mission today is to really unpack that standoff. We want to understand how an official treaty, one that's 100 years old, can just become completely useless. And what that tells us about, well, the very fragile link between international law and, day-to-day politics.
It's a perfect case study because the real tension here, if you want the short version, is the huge gap between what the law says should happen and what politics allows to happen.
Okay, so let's jump right in, because I think the first question everyone's going to have is, well, don't they have an extradition treaty?
They do, absolutely.
I mean, there must be something on the books.
There is. A formal extradition treaty was signed between the U.S. and Venezuela. It's not a legal gray area in that sense. The document exists.
And how old is this document? Because that usually tells a story.
It was signed in 1922. So for over a century, the idea has been very clear. If you're accused of a serious crime, you get sent back. You get extradited. That's supposed to be the bedrock of cooperation.
Which is what makes this so strange. You have this binding document, but it doesn't work. And the way our sources describe it is, I think, perfect.
It's a great analogy.
They say that in practice, this 1922 treaty is now about as useful as a fax machine in 2026.
I mean, that really says it all, doesn't it? Yeah. The hardware is there, but the operating system, the political environment, has completely changed. It's obsolete.
So it's a legal theory that just crashed into political reality.
That's a good way to put it. The thing you have to understand about extradition is that it's never automatic. A treaty is just a piece of paper unless both governments agree to cooperate.
It needs both sides to pick up the phone.
Exactly. Cooperation is the engine. And that engine just completely seized up.
So walk us through that. What was the political trigger that just stopped everything?
The whole system broke down at a very specific point. When the United States officially stopped recognizing the legitimacy of Venezuela's current government.
And that's not just a statement, right? That's an action with huge legal consequences.
Oh, massive. Because recognition determines who you talk to. If the U.S. says, we don't recognize your government, then who do they send an extradition request to?
There's no one to receive it, officially.
Precisely. The formal channel is just gone. And of course, that kind of action invites a response.
It's a tit for tat.
A very effective one. Venezuela basically said, fine, if you don't recognize us, we don't recognize your legal requests.
So they use the political situation as a shield.
A perfect shield. And this brings up a really interesting legal question.
Which is that even legal? Can you just decide to ignore a treaty because you're in a diplomatic spaff?
Well, the sources look at this from two different angles. First, they ask, is Venezuela's response legal? And the answer they give is debatable.
So lawyers could argue about it forever.
And they probably will. But then they ask a much more practical question.
Okay.
Is the response effective? And the answer to that one is very effective.
Right. Because at the end of the day, who's going to make them cooperate?
Nobody. There's no world police for this. If two countries won't talk, the law that exists between them just stops.
Yeah?
The legal mechanism is basically held hostage by foreign policy.
So let's pivot from the why to the what. What does this actually mean for a U.S. fugitive who manages to get to Venezuela?
For them, it means justice is on pause. Indefinitely. Their location becomes their best defense attorney.
So let's walk through the practical outcomes, because this must be so frustrating for law enforcement.
It's total paralysis. The list of consequences is pretty stark. First, obviously, no extradition. The request is either formally rejected or, more likely, just ignored.
It just sits in a pile somewhere.
Second, no informal handover either. The local authorities are not going to cooperate in any capacity. And third, you get these huge, long delays. Time becomes a weapon.
Okay, but the sources also mention a fourth outcome, which I found fascinating. Local charges.
Yes. This is a very strategic move. Instead of sending the person back, the Venezuelan government might decide to prosecute them for a crime there.
But why would they do that? Why take on the trouble of prosecuting, say, an American financial crime?
It's all about control and sovereignty. By charging them locally, they're making a statement. They're saying, this person is under our jurisdiction, not yours.
And it keeps the person in their country under their control.
Exactly. It prevents extradition, and it gives them a potential bargaining chip for later. They're prioritizing control over the justice that the U.S. is asking for.
So for U.S. authorities, they know exactly where their target is, they have the evidence, they might, as the source says, want them badly, but they just
Can't actually touch them. That's the phrase used.
It's a complete standoff.
It is. And it's described as a slow, awkward standoff. It's not a secret. Everybody involved knows the rules from the 1922 treaty.
And everybody knows they're being ignored.
Right. And because of that, the final result is that nothing moves. Justice just grinds to a halt.
So this specific case, it feels like it reveals a much more uncomfortable truth about how global justice works in general.
It really does. It's a lesson in the fragility of any international agreement. I think this situation really points to three sort of unavoidable realities.
Wait, what's the first one?
The first is that international law is almost entirely dependent on politics. A treaty is just a promise, and it only holds up as long as the political will to keep that promise exists. When the politics break, the law often breaks right along with it.
Which flows right into the second reality, I guess, that these treaties aren't self-enforcing.
Not at all. That 1922 document is just ink on paper until two governments decide to act on it. The diplomatic relationship is the power source. You unplug that, and the whole legal machine just shuts down.
And the third reality.
The third one is maybe the most important for you, for anyone listening to understand. Justice has borders. In our globalized world, we think everything is interconnected, but your actual legal safety, your risk of being arrested, that can change dramatically the second you cross a border.
It's such a paradox. A formal, legally valid treaty is essentially worthless because of current political disagreement.
That's the aha moment. When diplomacy fails, the legal system between those two countries just quietly hits pause. It's not a loud crash, it's just silence.
We've seen the treaty, we've seen how politics broke it, and we've seen what it means for fugitives on the ground. But as we finish up this deep dive, there's a final provocative thought this whole situation leaves you with.
It really makes you question what a treaty is for.
It does. And the question for you to think about is this. Should extradition treaties be designed to work even when governments stop recognizing each other? Is the law supposed to rise above politics?